This is the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 16, verse 1. And the Lord said unto Samuel, How long wilt thou mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill thine horn with oil, and go. I will send thee to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided me a king among his sons. Now, this is the account of the anointing of King David and his first major battle, which was the overthrow of the Philistine giant Goliath. And there are many principles or tenets and things that we can build upon from the text. One being that the Lord does not look on the outward appearance, and two, with faith, all things are possible. So going back to 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 2, and Samuel said, How can I go? If Saul hear it, he will kill me. And the Lord said, Take an heifer with thee, and say, I am come to sacrifice to the Lord. And call Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show thee what thou shalt do. And thou shalt anoint unto me him whom I name unto thee. So it is the Lord who determines who he glorifies, not man. Verse 4, And Samuel did that which the Lord spake, and came to Bethlehem. And the elders of the town trembled at his coming, and said, Come thou peaceably? And he said, Peaceably, I am come to sacrifice unto the Lord. Sanctify yourselves, and come with me to the sacrifice. And he sanctified Jesse and his sons, and called them to the sacrifice. And it came to pass, when they were come, that he looked on Eliab, and said, Surely the Lord's anointed is before him. But the Lord said unto Samuel, Look not on his countenance, or on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. So your intentions, your desire, your sacrifice, what is done in secret in order to draw closer to the Lord, is weighed in the balance when it comes to the Lord choosing who he wants to fulfill his purposes on the earth. Verse 8, 1 Samuel 16 and 8, Then Jesse called Abinadab, and made him pass before Samuel. And he said, Neither hath the Lord chosen this. So this is the second son now of Jesse. Then Jesse made Shammah to pass by, and he said, Neither hath the Lord chosen this. Again Jesse made 7 of his sons to pass before Samuel. And Samuel said unto Jesse, The Lord hath not chosen these. And Samuel said unto Jesse, Are here all thy children? And he said, There remaineth yet the youngest, and behold, he keepeth the sheep. And Samuel said unto Jesse, Send and fetch him, for we will not sit down till he come hither. And he sent and brought him. Now he was ruddy, and withal of a beautiful countenance, and goodly to look to. And the Lord said, Arise, anoint him, for this is he. So typically when it comes to inheritance, the inheritance normally passes from the father to the eldest son. But the anointing which the Lord had for Saul to pass on to be the um, next king and ruler over Israel was done to the eighth son of Jesse, being who is known as David, King David. So after the anointing, um, going into the next chapter, we see that there is a war occurring between the armies of Israel and the armies of the Philistines. So let's see what the Lord did with David after his anointing. This is the book of 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 21. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army, and David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage and ran into the army and came and saluted his brethren. So David was not a man of war. He was not one of these soldiers in the forefront of the army, but he was a tender of the sheep. This is 1 Samuel 17 and 23. And as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words. And David heard them, and all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and were sore afraid. Goliath was a giant at the time, but as we know, giants, they do fall. Verse 25, and the men of Israel said, have ye seen this man that is come up, surely to defy Israel? Is he come up? And it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, what shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living power? So we could see the faith of David at this time. David was a man who trusted in the Lord, who grew up understanding the covenant, and he believed and had faith, and that's all that he needed in order to fight his battles. Verse 27, and the people answered him after this manner, saying, so shall it be done to the man that killeth him. And Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spake unto the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. Remember, Eliab was passed on the anointing. And he said, why camest thou down hither? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride and thy naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. So he thought that David just came to be nosy. And David said, what have I now done? Is there not a cause? So David was ready, and if you go on the history records, he was known as a stripling. So he was a young adolescent that was transitioning from a boy into a man, going through puberty. So he was probably picked on by his brothers, if we can use our imagination, and they clearly thought that he was not ready for such a task. But remember, it's the Lord. Promotion comes from the Lord. verse 30, 1 Samuel 17 and 30. And he turned from him toward another and spoke again after the same matter. And the people answered him again after the former manner. So all of them are getting on David saying the same thing. And when the words were heard which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul. And he sent for him. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. So David could smell or recognize the fear in the hearts of these men who were the valiant warriors of Israel at the time. But David was fearless, and he took it upon himself to go and fight this battle. But remember, he had received the seal of the Lord in being anointed. Verse 33, and Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against the Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. But David was just a shepherd boy. Verse 34, and David said unto Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. So David is running down his history or his experiences, showing himself to be battle tested. Right? 1 Samuel 17 and 36. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this circumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living power. So David is definitely full of faith at this time, and speaking with a level of authority which came from on high. Verse 37, David said, moreover, the Lord hath delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear. He will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, go, and the Lord be with thee. And Saul armed David with his armor, and he put on helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go at these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him. So basically, David had agreed to fight, and they put on him the mortal clothing, or the armor of a warrior in a carnal battle. But David was not accustomed to training in this fashion, so he knew that it didn't behoove him to be able to go forth in such a manner. He wanted to fight comfortably, which would be without such a garment. 1 Samuel 17:40, and he took his staff in his hand and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had even in a scrip, and his sling was in his hand. And he drew near to the Philistine. And the Philistine came on and drew near unto David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. So, recapping, David had a staff and some stones, whereas Goliath came bearing the raiment of an actual soldier in a physical army. Verse 42, and when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy and of a fair countenance. So Goliath underestimated David and thought him to be easy pickings. Verse 43, and the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Remember, the Philistines were heathens, and they worshiped false gods. And David had behind him the power of the one true God, the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the field. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hands, and I will smite thee and take thy head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. So it's definitely getting heated. It's pre-match smack talking going on. Verse 47, and all the assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with the sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. For the battle is not yours, it's the Lord. And it came to pass, when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in the bag and took thence a stone and slang it and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk in his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. So with the stone and the sling and with his faith, David slung this stone and slew the giant. In order to kill a giant, it's going to take giant faith. Verse 50, so David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. So we all have different giants in our lives, different trials and tribulations, things that look to hold us back or are obstacles in our way. But remember, we must fight with the spirit. We are in a spiritual warfare, and we must fight with the shield of faith. So I implore you to continue to pray, exercise those spirits, and slay those giants with the spirit. You know, mighty the giant, the mightier the faith. With men, things are impossible, but with the Lord, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, all things are possible. Remember, freely receive, freely give.